All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming. My name is Todd Browse. I'm your host for the evening. I'm here with Susan Schultz and Ashley Wilson, and we would like to welcome everyone to HBAP Startups. So let's get started. For those of you who are new to the Startups group, we have a few announcements at the beginning of each meeting, and we'll do some short networking breakout rooms, and then we'll come back together for our main event. First off is our mission. We're here to help foster and fortify an innovation and entrepreneur community coming out of the Harvard Business Analytics program. Our goal is to provide our members with the tools, knowledge, leadership, and confidence necessary to create and grow their businesses from the ground up. Susan.
So there are many ways that you can get and stay in touch with us. So we have our website, we have HBAP's website, we have our YouTube channel where all the presentations are posted as long as the presenter has given us permission to do so. We have a newsletter, Slack channel if you're in HBAP, and then always bring a guest that you all know this is a really wonderful community. So if you know other people that might be interested in joining, HBAPers or not, it doesn't matter, invite them to attend. And then, as I noted before, unless the presenter says otherwise, these presentations are posted publicly on YouTube. And then today we have Christie Jenkins. We've been telling you about her for a while now, like how cool she is. So this is going to be super exciting to hear her talk with us today and be able to ask her questions. And then on July 10th, we have our own page leading an education session and what are the topics to talk about in using AI in education. So that'll be a live discussion. Then on the 17th, we have Nitsan Shah, who's the CEO of Wevo.ai, which is a really cool user research platform that really gives actionable insights in a much shorter time than you would get with some of the other tools. And then on July 24th, again, our own Pedro is going to talk about his latest book, which is The Real ROI, The Return on Inclusion, and really talk about his research and his interviews with some famous CEOs on what they're doing to really drive diversity and inclusion in their companies and the things to think about and the things to avoid. So some really cool speakers coming up. And so as Todd talked about, our mission of collaboration and inclusion. And so our code of conduct is really to make sure that we drive that kind of environment for everybody here and make sure that everybody feels comfortable in these sessions. So again, all rights are reserved by the presenter. And then we follow our honor code, and we also follow a revised Francis Fry feedback approach, which is just skip any tart or intense feedback, really focus on giving positive feedback, asking positive questions, because that's what works best for presenters and the audience. And then just a reminder, we're the only people that are recording this. There should not be any personal recording of these sessions so that we can honor the request of the presenters and the ownership of their material. And then as always, if you want to talk about something or you want to discuss a conflict of interest or anything like that, just reach out to Todd and me and Ashley, and we will help you figure it out.
All right, so thanks, Susan. Let's do some one-on-one social networking breakout rooms. I will see everyone in about 5-6 minutes. I think I got this working. All right, see you in a few. All right. Welcome back. Welcome back. I hope everyone had a good time in their breakout rooms. Okay, so just as a little reminder, when you leave Zoom this evening, there will be a little web page that pops up. It's a survey. Please fill out the survey. We're data people. It saves lives. It reduces your cholesterol levels. It's going to give you a great complexion. It's going to increase your stamina. So save a tree, kill a beaver, fill out the survey. We definitely appreciate it. And after we're done with our main event, we will stop recording. And tonight's recording will be made public on YouTube. But do please stick around for some overtime afterwards. That won't be recorded. All right. And now it is my honor to introduce tonight's speaker, Christie Jenkins. Christie is a former professional athlete. She's been #1 in Australia and top 10 in the world in 3 different sports. Trampolining, so like think somersaults, but like, 10 meters in the air. And then there's CrossFit, which is like putting like 100-kilogram barbells over your head, which I had to Google it. That's about 220 pounds. Um, and beach volleyball, and that's like chasing a ball on the best beaches around the world, and I've seen that. Unfortunately, she retired last year, so we have to find out, how's retirement doing. Now, Christie shares her mindset from elite sport and how to apply these lessons to leadership and culture. And you can find her speaking on the stages such as South by Southwest in Sydney, Sunrise, Southstart, TEDx, Techstars, Startmate, and numerous multinational companies. Christie is also the co-founder of FC32, where she buys soccer teams from around the world with a focus on athlete development. And she's a partner at Athletic Ventures and formerly an investor at Blackbird Ventures. Now, as is our custom here at HBAP Startups, if we could all please briefly unmute ourselves, and let's give a warm round of applause to Christie Jenkins. Christie, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Christian, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks. I need Todd as my ultimate hype guy. He can do all my intros, I think.
Oh, I'm available.
Okay, perfect.
I'm around.
Yeah, wonderful. You can come on the road with me around the world. It's so wonderful to be here. I've heard a lot about this group, and I love the community that you've built. And when I was chatting to Kelly and Todd and Susan, they said, come and tell some athlete stories. So that's what we're going to cover a little bit today, but I'll speak for about 30 minutes and happy to also go into anything on the VC world and then anything with the company that I'm building in the soccer and sporting world, particularly since it's a sporting year with the Olympics. So lots of things we're happy to touch on. Today, I played 3 sports, so we're going to do 3 stories. And the first story is something from trampolining, and what it really taught me the relationship between coaches and athletes and managers and employees, and like what is the distinction we can bring from sport and apply to our companies and our roles. And so maybe just like a show of hands, like who's been on a trampoline recently at all, ever, jumping with your kids? Most people, surely. Okay, cool. Anyone do a somersault? Kelly, yes. Ex-diver there. Can you still do a somersault, Kelly? How about a double somersault? Yep. Triple? Yeah, okay. Oh yeah, Todd, ultimate hype dude. Okay, cool. So as Todd said, competitive trampolining is a little bit different to what you do in your backyard. So imagine jumping 30 feet in the air, you're doing double and triple somersaults with twists, all while you have judges looking on to see if your toes aren't pointed enough or your little fingers out of place. And I started this sport at age 5. And by 13, I was already a 4-time national champion for my age group. And at 13, I loved training so much that I refused to go on holidays with my family because I'd miss sessions. I was 13, and as a teenager, I didn't respect my parents all that much, but I would do anything for my coach. You know, he was tough, pushing me through the fear, and he held insanely high standards, making us drill tricks over and over again until they were perfect. And he cared deeply. You know, he felt the results as strongly as I did, win or lose. I was 13 when I first felt brave enough to voice my goals out loud, and I told my coach, I want to go to the Olympics. And he didn't laugh, he didn't brush it off. He said, Christie, we're actually already working on getting you there. And I was 13 when my older teammate, John, the best athlete in the gym, fell. He was doing a 2.5 twisting triple somersault, got disorientated in the air, and from 30 feet up, he landed on his head. I remember the sound of the crash and then the silence. Every athlete in the gym completely still, and my coach the only one moving, leaping onto the trampoline to grab his hand, and John saying again and again, I can't feel my legs. I can't feel my legs. That day, my coach walked out of the gym and didn't come back. And John has not walked again. I was 13, and one of the most important people in my life had left. And now, if you have a business, you know that hiring is not easy at the best of times, but hiring a replacement trampoline coach is a very niche skill set. And there's maybe a handful of people in the entire country qualified to do that at an elite level, and all of them had jobs already. And eventually the club found a guy, and they found this guy in the circus. So I don't think the circus paid that well. He was mostly there for the paycheck. And as a result, if we did not show up for training as athletes, it was not really a big deal. He treated us all the same, no matter how much we put into training. You know, there was no personalization based on the effort we put in. And this guy, he knew how to teach tricks, but he just didn't really care if our toes were pointed or our legs were straight. And so he never held a high standard around the coaching. And when we needed to learn more difficult tricks, we basically had to bring all the bravery to do that ourselves. You know, he didn't push us to be more ambitious. And this coach knew that we had competitions coming up, but the circus is not competitive, so he just didn't care that much. And he figured, well, you can already do your routines, that's good enough. And so he never really pushed us for the consistency of that. We never did a practice competition in training. And he didn't share our goals and belief that we could go out and win those competitions. He didn't really care about the results. And so in a year of training, I effectively did not improve at all. I never really got real feedback, no coaching, no evaluation, no push to like learn those difficult tricks. And so what I learned here, in the contrast between my first coach and my second, was that the best coaches believe in their athletes, right? And the best managers do too. And the word belief rarely shows up. So how does a coach show their belief? They share your goals with you. When I say I want to go to the Olympics, my coach is like, yeah, like we're doing that together. They raise the level of ambition. You know, if you have a goal or you're going for a difficult trick, they're like, you can actually go further than that. They believe in you more. They personalize their coaching. So they say, hey, Christie, what exactly do you need? And how can we help you get there? And you are worth the time and effort because I believe in your potential. And they hold really high standards for us. You know, they know that we can hit that standard, and so they're not willing to accept anything less. So they believe in our ability to hit that standard. And so this is what we see in sport. The absolute best coaches have this belief, and it shows up in these ways. And when you come to the workplace, that's what I want to see from like the best leaders and the best managers. Now, 1 year after this happened in the gym, John fell on his head. He came back to the gym, not as an athlete, but to start his coaching career. And pushing his wheelchair was my coach. Now, they both went on to coach me for another decade, another 7 national title wins, more international gold medals. And today we're 20 years beyond that, and they are still both trampoline coaches. And we've had thousands of kids run through their programs, from kids that jump in the backyard to Olympic medalists, and they've all been on the receiving end of those coaches' belief. And so this is the first lesson I learned from sport, and my first sport, trampolining. Awesome. Number 2. Okay. The second lesson is really about standards. And I think we're all taught to like set goals, aim for goals, and I would argue that standards are much more powerful than goals. And so beach volleyball, my second sport, it's pretty cool. You go to all the best beaches in the world. And typically you have a summer season and you have an off season. And in the summer, every weekend you're traveling, you're playing a tournament. And in the off season, you're in the gym and you're on the sand working on skills. And normally I love off season. It's the chance to spend months honing your skills, knowing that when you step back onto the beach volleyball court in the summer, you're going to be so much better. And I love off season, except for 2016. That year was pretty rough. And I walked into training with my coach, Chris. And if you can imagine, he took a plastic chair, like a little beach chair, and he put it on the opposite side of the court near the baseline on the sand. And he said to me, he's like, you have to hit the chair with the volleyball. So hit the ball over the net and I need it to land on that spot on the court where the chair has been planted. I was like, okay, that seems reasonable, not too hard. He said, you have to hit it 20 times before the end of the session, and each time I'm going to make the defense before the hit more difficult for you. So I would have to like sprint to one side of the court, like dive flat out and dig the ball, and then get up, sprint to the other side of the court, jump up and hit it. And 20 became quite a difficult challenge when you threw that in. And my coach had always walked this line between setting goals that were achievable but difficult. And so I was like, okay, it seems hard, but it's probably within reach. I'll probably be able to do it. I was very wrong. That day, I hit the chair 7 times. And I was like, well, that one did not work out. I'll come back tomorrow, we'll do training again, and he'll come up with like a drill that's more at my level, something that I can actually achieve and hit that's still a challenge. And the next day I came back to training, and Chris put the chair on the court, and he said, we're going to keep doing this drill until you hit it 20 times in a single session. Oh. He told me, Christie, you're one of the best athletes I've ever coached, and you can already do everything the best players in the world can do. You're fast, you're athletic, you can hit every shot on the court, but to get from playing on the world tour to winning on the world tour, you have to be more consistent. You can't just make that hit and that shot sometimes, you have to hit it every time, right? So he set the standard for me. That day at training, I hit the chair 8 times. And the next session I show up to training and he puts the chair on the court and doesn't even say a word. And the next session and the next. And I would hit that ball so close to the chair that the breeze would make it wobble and he wouldn't count those reps. And I'd knock the chair over on the bounce of the ball and he never counted those reps. And I would leave training in tears of frustration. And my coach never budged. The drill never changed. He never conceded a single point out of the 20. Now, it's pretty rare to find a coach with the patience or maybe the stubbornness to like hold that standard for so long. And so the lesson I learned from this coach was standards are more powerful than goals. You know, standards are the minimum level we tolerate, and goals are sort of like the aspirational thing that we hope to hit, right? And we've probably seen this play out in teams. You know, what tends to happen is we default to the standard. And so the minimum acceptable level is what people end up gravitating towards. So if you have a team of people and, you know, one guy, Max, is slacking off and like coming into work a little late, submitting kind of sloppy work, everybody else sees that it doesn't matter. He's not being called out for not meeting the standard, and people tend to revert to that standard within the team. And so standards are actually more powerful than goals when you're thinking about high performance and setting the benchmark for people. Now, my goal is always to win. I don't always hit my goal, but I always hit the standard, right? Any guesses on how long it took me to hit that chair 20 times in one practice?
A year.
2 weeks from Todd. Think longer than that, mate. 2 months, 3 months, longer.
A year.
Never.
Never.
Never. 6 months. So basically the entire off season. Every single day at training, the exact same drill. And now I can hit that spot on the court every single time. Like that is the standard, right? And I remember celebrating with like this huge sigh of relief, a little dance in the sand. And later that night, I demolished a whole block of chocolate myself. And my coach, Chris, he's pretty low key. So he just smiled and gave me a high five. And I came back to training the next week and I was like, finally, we are going to do something different at training. And Chris got out the chair and he just put it on a different spot on the court. So this was lesson 2 I had from sport. Standards, more powerful than goals. The one last story I want to share with you is about pressure. And I think we've probably all heard the saying, pressure is a privilege. And I would say that's true. Like you have to earn your spot, but it is also not particularly useful. And so what I learned from being an athlete is pressure is actually a test of your preparation. And we probably don't prepare enough at work when we do a lot more preparation in sport. So my third sport was CrossFit. And I want you to imagine that you are standing on the starting line of the World CrossFit Championships. And the stadium around you is packed. The noise is deafening. You have the fans screaming out, waving their country's flags, and they're all looking down at you. And you look to your left and to your right, and next to you, you see 30 of the fittest athletes in the world. Their muscles are sharp, abs cut, eyes laser focused. They are so fit, you think to yourself. And here I am, standing next to them. Athletes, 10 seconds remaining. The announcer's voice snaps you out of it. Flip your thinking. You've trained years to stand on this starting line, and you went through the qualification process to get here, same as everyone. This is your time. And you dig your toes into the grass, getting more grip. 3, 2, 1. Wait for the starting gun. Wait for it. Bang. You're off. You race up the field, sprinting. Next to you, those 30 other athletes take off in a wave, and you push your legs for speed for a tiny little edge over your competition. You screech to a halt in front of your barbell. There's no time to even take a breath. You wrap your left arm and your right arm around the bar, yank it off the ground, and start the workout. Now, has anyone here done CrossFit before? Anyone? No? Okay. A little bit, Kelly. A little bit, Garrett. Awesome. So CrossFit is a sport of working out. So it's a combination of weightlifting, fitness, and gymnastics movements. And in the sport of CrossFit, there are workouts that are so well known and famous that they are named after people. So Murph, Helen, Annie, Grace. And the most famous workout at all is called Fran. Now, Fran is a little bit of a bitch. It really hurts. And it's just 2 movements. Thrusters, so you're holding the barbell on your shoulders, squatting to full depth. And then as you stand up, you press the bar overhead, and pull-ups, right? So 21 thrusters, 21 pull-ups, 15 thrusters, 15 pull-ups, 9 thrusters, 9 pull-ups, a total of 90 reps. That is the workout of Fran. Now, we were doing Fran at the World CrossFit Championships. And as you pick up that barbell to start your thrusters, you're like 1, 2, 3, and you have a judge in front of you counting off those reps. You start to find your rhythm up and down, using your whole body. Now that first set of reps, those first 21 thrusters are not too bad. Then you go onto the pull-up bar. Eyes up, spot the bar, leap up, grab it. And the bar's hot under your hands. You're in the California sun, and the sweat is starting to drip down your neck. Keep going, you tell yourself. Now it starts to get hard. 13, 14, 15, your arms are protesting, you gasp in a breath, and the hot air is in your throat. You're desperate for a drink of water, but you just started. No one next to you is resting. Keep going. 21 reps. First round is done. 21 thrusters, 21 pull-ups. You still have the 15s and the 9s to go. At this point, the lactic acid kicks in. Your triceps are burning. Your core hurts. Just keep going, you tell yourself. 15s are done. And as you move back to the barbell, you get to hesitate for a moment. It's a planned rest, practiced in training with your coach watching on. 1 breath is all you're allowed. Shake out your hands, pick up the barbell, and it doesn't feel like you rested at all. Your sweat is like making the bar slippery. Hold on, push through the hurt, keep going. This is what you train for. All those early mornings in the gym, all the late nights. Finally, you're onto your last set of pull-ups. Just 9 more reps. And your grip is faltering, sliding down to your fingers. And your judge narrows his eyes, watching for any tiny mistake. 1 more rep to go. And the roar of the crowd is crazy at this point. Faintly, you think you hear someone screaming, "Come on, Christie, keep going." And your chin inches over the bar. And the judge confirms it. You let go of the bar, drop to the ground, run up the field, touch the buzzer. All 90 reps, done. The clock reads 2 minutes, 48 seconds. welcome to the CrossFit Games. That's event 1. You have 15 more to go. Wes, you want to try CrossFit now? So the term pressure is a privilege is true, right? Now, you have to do the work to earn the spot to stand on that starting line in the CrossFit Games. But standing on that starting line, thinking to yourself, it's a privilege to be here, does not help you at all do that workout and do that workout well under pressure. What does help you is preparation. Now, in sport, we spend about 95% of our time preparing and training and about 5% performing or competing. And at work, that's basically flipped on its head, right? We're spending all our time performing and executing and very little time preparing or practicing or training, right? In terms of leveling up our skill and our capacity and our ability. And so the lesson I take from sport here is if you actually want to do well under pressure, you need to spend more time on preparation, much more than the standard is set in typical workplaces. And I'll share that like a month before this moment at the CrossFit Games, we did Fran in training, right? Now, the training routine preparing for that competition is a little insane. So I was doing 11 training sessions a week, 2 to 3 hours a session, working a full-time job on top of that. And every one of those sessions is hard, but when you walk into training and your coach is like, we're doing Fran today, you know it's going to be a little extra special. And we did that first set of Fran, and my teammates and I just put everything into the workout. And in a little under 3 minutes, I'm lying on the floor in the fetal position trying to recover. And my coach says to me, he's like, get up. And he looked at each of us and we looked back at him in surprise. My teammate is like, what? Like, we're resting now. He's like, get up. You did well, but we're going again. You've got to do Fran again in 2 minutes. And I just remember like crawling to my knees, standing up. I was like, again? He's like, yes. Not a single one of us as athletes were recovered, and yet we all stood up and walked back to our barbells, waiting for his mark. 3, 2, 1, go. And we did Fran again. And I finished that workout in about 4 minutes, slower, but still a good time. And as I dropped from the pull-up for my final rep, my coach was waiting. And he said, 2 minutes rest, and we go again. Now, triple Fran is an outrageous ask from a coach. Like, that is a workout that you just feel completely wiped the entire day. None of us questioned him. But when you're lining up at the starting line of the games, I felt the pressure, but I also felt extremely prepared, right? I'd done this workout 3 times in a row. Doing it once, it's kind of like a walk in the park after that. And so this is the final lesson from sport I'm sharing today, all about how do we spend more time on preparation when it comes to moments of pressure. And so this is the bulk of what I wanted to cover today. So trampolining taught me that the best coaches and the best managers have this insane belief in their athletes and in their employees. The second is that standards are more powerful than goals when you're thinking about performance. And the third is pressure requires preparation. So I'm going to close out there, and I feel like we get all the fun chats and Q&A from here.
Christie, thank you. I needed to hear this really badly right now. The timing on that is just priceless. Folks, if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hands on Zoom and we'll call on you. This is such a treat, Christie. Like, I'm in shock. I was almost in tears when you told us that first story. So yeah. Thank you for this. This is really wonderful. Kelly, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so here you are now. You've retired from athletics, which I don't believe you probably did. I mean, I'm assuming you still work out 10 hours a day. But you've been a venture capitalist. You've now got a startup. You're now raising money. How much of it are you finding similar? There's certain lessons you definitely learn from athletics, and teamwork and et cetera, et cetera. But what's the one takeaway you're feeling right now, where you have to call back to your athlete days to get you through the day?
I think that the mindset of founders and athletes is similar in many ways and requires many of the same mental skills. The one that's maybe overlooked often that I find myself calling on frequently is when you start a sport, you have very low odds of making it to the top, right? Like 0.02% of athletes ever make it to a pro level. I think you are more likely to win the lottery than make it to the Olympics. And so you start a sport being like, you have to believe you can make it, and yet your odds of success are very low. And at the same time, you are committing to several decades worth of insane training in order to have a shot at that. Now, being a startup founder is incredibly similar, like your odds of success are extremely low. And yet you still need that same belief and commitment and discipline to be like, I'm going to spend 10 to 20 years of my life on this to have a shot at it working out. And so there are rough times as an athlete, many, many rough times, and there are rough times as a founder. And so that is the piece of the mindset that has been most overlapping between the two.
And can I say that I think the most important part of your entrepreneurial journey, of anybody's entrepreneurial journey, is your ability to storytell. You know, we see pitches all day, every day, and they're all the same. And storytelling is such an important, vital part of that. You just nailed that, by the way, in your ability to tell stories. Do you find your ability to tell those stories the way you tell them have been helpful in your discussions with especially when you're raising money?
I hired a speaking coach maybe like 7 or so years ago. I do like a fair amount of speaking. And I think it's relatively easy to be like a 7 out of 10 speaker, right? It's, you know, if you just like have decent content and you're well prepared and you like have practiced it and you're somewhat confident on stage, like solid 7 out of 10, right? And the differentiator is storytelling, as you say. And I found it very difficult to tell my own stories with the right level of like, how do I make you as the audience feel emotional and engaged and caught up in the story? But you're an athlete, so you're telling your own story. And I don't want that to come across as being egotistical in any way, right? And so what is the balance of how to structure a story to do that? Now, when you're talking about your startup, it's in some ways easier because it is a little separate to you. Like, yes, you're telling your story as a founder, but it's a little bit easier to like brag about someone or something else. And so that has been easier on the storytelling front to tell other people's stories. I don't know. I'm a big believer in just like getting a coach for every skill you want to get good at.
That's the trick. There it is.
Yeah. Pay the best coach you can. Like, none of this teach yourself on YouTube stuff.
Doesn't work.
I mean, it works eventually.
Eventually.
Much slower.
Kelly, were you going to follow up on that? Sorry.
I've got like 10, 20 questions. So
Oh, good. Okay. So do I.
I can go forever. You know, the other thing I'm going to ask you is I was an athlete in my childhood, like this was 100 years ago.
Much better athlete than me.
And gave up everything, you know, because my goal was the Olympics as well. And literally had zero life. I worked out 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours a day. School was secondary, education was secondary, everything was secondary to your sport. Is there anything you feel like you gave up that was you wish you'd have gone back and recaptured?
No.
No regrets.
None. I mean, it's a choice I wouldn't say it's a choice every day. Like I would say it's a choice every season or every year. And then once you've made that choice, you're sort of committed to it for that period of time. You don't want to wake up every morning when your alarm goes off and be like, do I still want to be an athlete? It's sort of like, okay, I've committed to this season. I'm at training early every day now for that, and I can reassess in a year's time. But the trade-off of like what you get from being an athlete is so insanely good. Like you will never get that experience of like walking out onto center court with thousands of screaming fans and, you know, playing in the zone for like an hour at a time against an opposition that by all rights should beat you, and then somehow you overcome them like on the last match point pressure ball. Like that is like irreplaceable to me. The depth of relationship I have with my coach and my teammates is irreplaceable to me. You know, I find work to be much less emotionally intense than I would sport. And so like it's very special for that reason and no regrets.
So I go one more and then I'll leave you alone. The day after, you know, when you decided you'd retire, how difficult a transition was that to transition into a more of the normal work life?
Kelly, I've retired 3 times. You think I would be better at it because I've played 3 sports. It is still really hard. And a couple of things I knew would be hard. So like decoupling my identity from I'm an athlete to now I'm no longer an athlete is very tough. Missing those big moments and emotionally intense moments is very tough. A couple of things that surprised me, I think, you know, I went and spoke to a lot of athletes, and I actually spoke to a lot of founders that had stepped away from their startup or exited their startup because it's like identical mindset. 2 things that surprised me was, one, everyone felt like they had left something on the table. And I think the personality of people drawn to sport and entrepreneurship is very future orientated, and you are going after improbable, unlikely goals. And so you have to back yourself 1,000%. So as a result, whenever you walk away from something, there is something still in front of you that you believed you could have achieved. And that belief is actually pretty strong. And so universally, every athlete and founder that steps away has felt that they could have done more. Sold your company for like 500 million. Like I spoke to a founder that said this. He's like, yeah, probably could have got 2 billion. You know, spoke to an athlete that like got silver at the Olympics. He's like, you know, 0.1 away from getting gold. And so like everyone feels they could have done something more. So I was not alone in that feeling. And I think the other challenge is you go from being like world class at one thing to like a complete beginner at what you do next. And so, and not only a beginner, you know, you are retiring from sport, like let's say in your 30s, you look around, everybody else has 10 years of work experience on you, so they're ahead of you. So not only are you starting at 0 at the starting line, you're like, oh, actually, like everyone's got a head start on me, and I used to be the best in the world, and now I'm the worst in this career. And I'm old compared to everybody else at my level, you know, that's coming out of college and starting this career. And so like that's probably like one of the other challenges that I was like, I'm used to being good at something, and now I have to like be humbled and be like a complete beginner again.
Thank you. I'll quit bugging you.
Thanks. So I'm going to go to Jamal and then Sri in a second. But so Christie, I want to ask you a question about you know, these standards, and I love what you said. The best coaches believe in their athletes, and from a business perspective, from a leadership perspective, we have to believe in the people that we lead, and you have to have these high standards. And I'm curious, how do you motivate someone who's not in, you know, achieving those standards? It's not goals. It's like, well, the goal would be to meet the standards. And again, there lies the problem. But then, I mean, I guess what reminds me of something that Francis Fry says was it's high standards and high devotion. And how do you get someone who's not meeting those standards to get there? Because again, it's not like, hey, do you want to be in the Olympics? No, it's a job. They get paid. They show up 9 to 5. There's a scope here. How do we transition that mentality and inspire and get them to those high standards?
Well, hopefully you've hired people that have some level of motivation or devotion.
No, we never do that. No,
let's assume that as a starting point. I really love, I think Adam Grant shares this research that if you give the phrase, I'm giving you these comments because I have high expectations of you and I believe you can reach them.
Yeah.
Right. So when are you most receptive to feedback? It's actually like when you feel like you're kicking ass, right? So like, what do you feel like you're good at, and how do you even be even a little bit better? And, or somebody is like, I know you that you can hit this. I believe in you. Like that is when you're pretty receptive to feedback. And so you earn the right as a manager or a teammate or a leader to give feedback by setting clear expectations and setting clear standards. And then you deliver that by saying, I believe in you. And here's why I'm giving you this feedback.
And
now,
that's it.
Yeah.
I believe in you.
Yes.
That's my devotion to you. And these are the standards. And I'm here for you to help you meet those standards.
Exactly.
I love it. That's what I need to hear.
I believe in you, Todd.
Thanks, Christy. All right, let's go to Jamal, and then we'll go to Sri, and then Victor. Jamal.
Yeah, sure. I want to say thank you for sharing your stories with us. It's very, very inspiring. Thank you for being here. The question I have is based on this. So you emphasize the importance of coaching, right? And how great coaches have impacted your career and made a difference. As a business owner, business leader, I'm pretty sure you have to do some coaching of your own. So I'm curious to learn, what is your coaching style like? How much influence has come from your experience being coached? And what impact has that coaching had on your various business ventures?
Yeah, I would say I give probably 50 times more feedback than any coach in the workplace. And so like that is where I'm wildly different to how most other managers or coaches work. And being an athlete has given me that gift of like noticing that about people. Like, what is your goal? Like, Jamal, what do you want to achieve in your career? Whether it's here or somewhere else, how do we work towards that together? And okay, now let me give you very tactical, real-time, constant feedback to help you achieve that. And I also think that, you know, I am not the best coach for everything, right? So if you're like, I want this skill set and this skill set and this skill set, I'm like, well, I can work with you on this one, but let's go find experts to help you on the other two. And so part of being a coach is the belief part of it is the skill set and expertise part. And so like, I'm not always the best on that and I need to find someone else, right? I don't know. If you ever work with me, just like be ready. If you're like, can I have some feedback, Christy? I'll be like, yeah, no problem. Here's 3 pages.
Oh, so it's so much for 5 to 1. Okay.
Yeah.
Jamal, thanks.
Oh, no. Okay, wait. So there's like 3 types of feedback, right? There's appreciation, there's coaching, and there's evaluation. And so appreciation is like, hey, great job. I appreciate your effort. I see what you're putting in. Thank you for being a team player. Like all of this type of stuff. It's basically all positive. Coaching is like, here's how you get better. Now, people think this is negative, but actually imagine that you signed up for your first golf lesson and your coach just stood there and said nothing for an hour. Like you would want your money back, right? And so actually coaching is like, it's just like, it's not positive or negative. It's just like, here are the quick corrections to help you do this better. And then evaluation is like, here's where you stand relative to the expectations, your peers' performance, your past performance, your goal that you're aiming for. But that's like a judgment, right? And so like I would typically say, do, you know, for every 1 piece of evaluation, do like 3 to 5 pieces of coaching and do like 10 pieces of appreciation. Okay.
Love it. All right, who's next? Sorry, Sri, you're up.
Sri.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much. It's wonderful. Sorry, I'm driving on my Tesla, so sorry about that. So beautiful presentation. One question I have for you is, lots of
Sri, we're losing you. I think we lost Sri. All right, let's go to Victor, and then when Sri comes back, wherever he is, we'll come back to him.
Okay, thank you.
Victor.
Christy, what a pleasure to meet you and to hear your stories.
Thank you.
I wanted to share with the group something, and then I have a question for you. As you were telling your third story about somehow getting to the starting line and looking to the left and right and seeing this amazing group of people that you're now among, I have the exact same experience joining this Harvard Business Analytics program and being a part of this community. We don't look left and right, we look straight at Zoom and see the grid of amazing people that we're among. And it's equally a privilege, as you described in your journey in that story. What I wanted to ask you about is, and it's going to sound like I'm going to ask, when did you learn to trust your coach? But that's not what I'm going to ask. What I want to ask is, as a 13-year-old with a goal, a standard, something in your heart that drove you into sport and into pursuing your passion at the world-class level. You come into trampoline and you have a coach. I presume you had some knowledge of the coach's reputation and what the potential was there. But I wonder if you could talk about the evolution of your personal relationship with that coach, from my coach, the means to my end, the one with experience that I need to gather, the one that I need to learn from, to we're in this together, and no matter what, whatever you say, we're in this together.
That's a good question. So I would say there's actually like a single point in time that this became really clear to me, and that was when I was 8, and I had just won state championships for my age group and was the youngest ever to qualify for like the under 11s national championships. And only 5 people in the whole country even qualified for the event, and I came dead last. Like, I was absolutely crushed. I remember like sobbing on my dad's lap for like an hour after that event, and just being like, I never want to feel like so crushed again. And that was sort of the turning point on like, okay, I want my coach to push me more, and going to training and doing the scary tricks. Like, it's scary when you're 8 and you're like upside down doing double somersaults and you could fall, right? And but I was like, the pain of that moment is worse than the scariness of trusting your coach and allowing your coach to push you. And then I came back 1 year later and won the national titles. And so it sort of like validated that decision moment, right? Now, if I think about the number one thing a coach brings to that relationship is belief in the athlete. I believe in your potential. I support your goals. I know that you can do more and do better. What's the number one thing an athlete brings to that relationship, or an employee, right, in a company? And I would say that that is trust, right? So I will do what my coach says. I trust that their feedback is coming from a good place. I trust that they are mapping out my path for my best interests and not their own. And so that is like the dynamic of that relationship. And 8 years old is kind of when that turning point happened for me.
That's amazing. And what I also heard from that is, in the business world, as a leader of people, it seems like it's equally important to express your belief in them, not just do what I say because I'm the person who sees it all and you only see a piece, or any of that kind of what I'll call nonsense traditional managing.
Like, sometimes I feel like we're in a culture where we're like, I'll trust you when you earn it. But like, what would it look like to show up and be like, you have, as an employee, you have my trust, you have my obedience, you have my support from day one until you lose it. So you start with trust, or you start with belief, rather than being like, you've got to earn it first. I don't know. I think people would show up differently if it was like that.
And I imagine that's how you would run your businesses as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that.
Thanks, Victor. Craig, and then we'll go to Wes.
Hey, Christie, I was very fortunate. I got 5 minutes with you, to myself. So I got a little bit more of a story, particularly with your startup. So I just got a question around, visualization and success. All right. So, with your startup, how would you describe success? What does success look like in your mind? And is that something you visualize? That's one part. And did you, in your success of your sports, which is like phenomenal, did you visualize that as well?
1,000% yes. So a ton of visualization in every sport, of both, like, of 3 things, right? So 1, skill-based visualization. How do you do this triple somersault, imagining the movements of it? 2 is sort of the pressure of competition, so that you feel prepared when you show up on that starting line. like you've felt it before because you've visualized that pressure situation. And 3 is like the outcome piece, which is what you just asked about, like standing on the top of the podium, winning the gold medal, and visualizing and believing in that outcome. Now, to give you a little bit about my startup, we're buying soccer teams around the world with a focus on athlete development. So in soccer, there's a transfer market, which imagine that I owned a club. Craig is a star athlete. He's under contract to play for me. And Kelly also owns a club, and he naturally wants Craig on his team, right? Now, not only would he have to pay Craig's salary as an athlete, he has to pay me as the club owner a transfer fee. And so that market of club to club payments for athletes is like $9 billion. And so that's the market we're going after, by taking athletes from the academy, moving them between multiple clubs that we own, and then ultimately selling them in the transfer market. To give you context, like the average sale price of an athlete going into the Premier League is about 18 million euro. So that is wild talent market there. What does success look like for us? That means to me owning 7 or more clubs, including a Serie A team in Italy. It means bringing equality to the game and treating male and female athletes the same. And it means building, you know, a 7 club model should allow you to do 100 million plus in transfer revenue a year. And so those are sort of the top 3 goals of success on my list. And I definitely visualize them.
Awesome. Awesome.
Wes?
No, I just like, I mean, we all of us have been athletes, you know, have this kind of like, I mean, your stories were like awesome. Just wanted to say that. No, I mean, one of the questions that kind of like I kind of percolated in my mind as he told all these kind of stories, you know, with AI, we have this whole idea that, you know, machines or all this tech is going to replace human beings, you know, and I mean, you really like kind of highlighted the fact that, you know, I mean, that human connection, that human experience is, you know, so vital to kind of everything we do. And it's really overlooked. I mean, you know, I was an athlete. I did sports, military kind of stuff, and you know, a lot of us, you know, you saw like always this high suicide rate, for example, with a lot of military guys, because that connection is severed. Like when you come back, you know, you're like a lot of people find themselves in the woods, you know, basically on their own because you know you don't have those bonds anymore. I think athletes suffer kind of similar kind of depression. You know, and then when you translate this now to business or corporate world, you know, I think there's a lot of that kind of similarity because the competition is so, you know, it's not a positive competition like you have in sport. You know, a lot of it's like cutthroat, you know, I push you out the window, I get your slot, you know, sort of mentality to some degree. You know, I don't know, this is kind of some of the stuff that like
I don't
floated
know
through
what
my
business
mind.
you work in where you're shoving people
No,
out the window.
I'm just saying, like, but I mean, that's, you know, there's a lot of that, right? In the whole, like, you know, I gotta to win, I gotta basically kill somebody else, you know, like to get the spot, to get the slot. I mean, in terms of that's how we're kind of like acculturated in a lot of this kind of space, you know. And I just wondered, like, you know, how you think about all that. Like, I mean, you see like they talk about, you know, Gen Z or you know some of these the depression, the anxiety around all the technology now. You know, it's just kind of interesting that, you know, on one hand you're talking about that warm connection in terms of, you know, when you're with a team and you're like, you know, the competitiveness that brings us all so close together. And then, you know, on the other hand, you know, you have this kind of isolating effect, you know, with a lot of the technology now, and it's changing kind of, I think, a lot of the dynamics with, you know, with human connection in particular. I mean, you have more than a 5-minute conversation with somebody, you know, and it's like, you know,
yeah,
kind of
I'm
a
still a
different thing.
weirdo that like calls my friends instead of texting.
Yeah. So,
Okay,
anyway,
that
there's
was
some
like a
thoughts.
few things wrapped up in one. So first, like on competition, you know, the company I work at, they're my teammates, right? Like I'm not gunning for their spot as such. Like the competition is out there with the competitors to the company. And business is not a zero-sum game, actually, which is sport is, right? Like if I get gold, you can't have it, right? There's only one gold. But business, like there are many ways to win. And so it is not a zero-sum game. And often, you know, the best performers are found at like the intersection of 2 different things or creating new fields or like not necessarily like, hey, we're climbing the corporate ladder and I'm shoving you off the window so I can go up the next rung. So I actually kind of miss competition, but I try to channel it into, okay, the enemy is like the competitors to our company. But actually even that's not wholly true because you can always just grow the market, right? The piece on like mental health, I think about this as health is on a spectrum, both physical and mental, right? From sickness to wellness to fitness to high performance. And if you move yourself up that spectrum, even if you took a physical trait, right? Like, what's your resting heart rate? So sick is like, hey, your heart is racing because you're so unfit, like your heart can't support your body's needs. And then like as you get well, it's like, okay, you're normal and average, then you get fit, and then you can be, you know, high performance elite cyclist, for instance. And so moving yourself up that spectrum gives you a buffer against mental illness or physical illness because you are further up the spectrum. And so, you know, we would say preventative health, but I would actually say like if you edge more towards performance in mindset and in physicality, you protect against illness.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I mean, in the corporate world, I mean, you know, you do all these different, I mean, like, you check everybody's personality and you do all these kind of creative metrics and things trying to figure that out. You know, I mean, but I think we all definitely remember those times when you're with that unique team, right? I mean, even in the business world, you know, where you just got the right mix, the right flavor of people, like in terms of the sharing of thoughts and ideas and you know, like you said, going out and slaying the dragon together, sort of like, you know, winning in that competitive market space. So yeah, no, it's good stuff, Christie.
Find your teammates.
Sorry about that. I've got a huge storm rolling in here. Wes, thanks. Zandra and then Jamal.
There I go. So thank you again, Christie. Your story was very inspiring, and like it has been said, it was like watching a movie. Like your words were vivid, and it was very good storytelling. So my question to you is, did you have a role model who influenced you, maybe from a physical point of view or mental aspect in your life, to have you reach your exemplary goals and that desire to even want to get there? Was there a role model, and do you have one now?
Many role models. I definitely looked up to my coaches a lot. I looked up to other athletes in my sport. One of my favorite athletes of all time is Roger Federer. And, you know, like I'm 36. So like if you were sort of in my age range, you got to grow up watching him win everything. I think it is much harder to win the second time than it is the first. And it is even harder to win consistently over and over and over again. And that is for a couple of reasons. Like one, everyone is gunning for you. Like you actually have a whole generation of players that play like Nadal because that's the only style that beat Federer. So he changed the game in that sense. It's also tougher because of diminishing returns. Like the better you get, the harder it is to improve more. And so to stay ahead of everyone becomes more and more difficult. And then to do it and stay humble and have grace under pressure. Like, what is the character that you bring to sport and not just the winning, right? You can win once, you can win many times. If you're an asshole, no one will care. And so, yeah, I have many role models, and I think the best, you know, one of the most magical things in life is when the people you look up to and respect as role models end up becoming friends, and that I've been lucky to have many people that have become friends as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra. Jamal, then we'll go to Kelly.
Sure. Thanks again. Earlier, you mentioned feedback, the importance of giving feedback, receiving feedback. So context, I also grew up playing sports. American football was my sport growing up. So translating to business, I'm comfortable getting feedback, receiving feedback from coaches, management, giving feedback to colleagues. I work at an organization where feedback is a big part of our culture. We're in our 360 feedback cycle now. And the question I have for you is, or actually advice I'm probably asking is like, how would you give effective feedback to your coach or manager and senior management? So think of like skip level managers, because in sports, you don't really give feedback to your coach. You're kind of really accepting it and really adapting to it and getting better yourself, but you don't really give that feedback back in a sports environment usually. And then also, as a manager, a business operator, what kind of feedback are you looking for from your direct reports and their direct reports? Because I'm looking to give that feedback to my manager, my manager's manager, like skip level.
Yeah. Okay, so upwards level feedback. I'd say follow 2 rules here. So 1 is tell them they're awesome. Here's how you can do a little bit better. And 2 is be really specific. So to give you an example, I once gave feedback to like I was pretty new in the VC world, and I gave feedback to like one of the partners of the fund, right? Now, this is a touchy topic too, because I wanted to give him feedback on like gender and bias, right? And so what I said to him, I was like, hey, actually, like I've looked at the data and you invest in more female founders than any of the other partners at the fund. Like, this is amazing. Congratulations. But I would say that you are, one of the things you could improve on as a leader is to stand for something. And I am not sure what you stand for as a leader. Here are 3 possible suggestions of things you might want to do. And I was like, here's A, B, and one of them was around gender, right? And I was like, here are 10 examples of things that you could change in order to be seen as a leader in this field, to go from, hey, you are actually already like pretty good on the behavior of like investing in more women, but you're not a leader, right? In that space. And that could be like, hey, you have a personal blog, but you've never mentioned a female as a hero in that. We have investment committee meetings. I've never heard you raise like, have we considered unconscious bias when we're talking about the personality of the founder? If you change the investment process, and now that founders are mostly meeting males in the investment team because they're more senior rather than women who tend to be in the more junior VC roles, how does that affect the founder experience? So it was like, here's a list of like 10 different examples, like very, very specific, right? But I've started by saying, you're awesome at this. Here's how to be even a little bit better or more of a leader, right? So that's the framing I use going up. Going down, because you want feedback from the people below you, right? And that's a little scary and intimidating for them, because people are not always like, they're like, how are they going to take this feedback? Like if I'm too direct or harsh. One thing you can do is be like, here are the 3 things I'm working on this year to try and get better at. So you can kind of fill in the blank page for them. And then you could ask them like, hey, could you give me like examples of or suggestions of how I can show up better because I'm working on these 3 things. I think it's like a pretty neat way to like get more specificity out of the people below you.
That's fair. Then the very last thing was like, what feedback do you look for from your direct reports? And what is like has been some useful feedback you've received recently?
So I am the co-founder of a startup. There's like 3 co-founders. We don't really have employees just yet. But I would say the feedback I'm looking for is my blind spots, right? I'm pretty aware of my strengths and weaknesses. And so the feedback that's most valuable is like, what's a blind spot? Something I've totally overlooked. And that could be like, hey, I make employees feel in a certain way that I didn't intend. I totally overlooked doing something that would be important to the business. That's the type of feedback I mostly am looking for and asking for.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Jamal. Kelly, then Adolfo.
Yeah, so Christie, after a lifetime of coaches that you've listened to and you've relied upon, who are your coaches or who are your mentors now? What do you look for? Do you have any at this point?
Oh yeah, tons, and I always want more. So, I am looking for people that I aspire to be like, in some aspect, right? So a coach, you're looking for like, if I was like, I want to get better at a skill set, I'm sort of looking for expertise in the skill. A mentor, they're kind of mapping out a pathway for me. And then like a role model or someone that I'm, inspired by and look up to and want to emulate, what is the quality about them that I deeply admire? So one of my mentors who has somewhat become a friend, I admire his ability to be completely present in every conversation. Like you walk out feeling like, man, that was like the most fulfilling conversation I've had all year. And you also realize I barely asked him anything. Like he just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And I was like, wow, that is an incredible quality in a person and a human. There are other people that, I admire, on the investing side for their skill set and their intuition in like getting to the heart of this investment turns on this one thing, rather than being like, I have to diligence 100 things. They're like, if I know this one thing, I know yes or no whether I'm investing. So I admire like the incisiveness of that. And then I think I admire people that bring out the best in others as leaders. And so people are excited to work with them. They want to be in their presence and around them. And that comes in all different styles, like quiet, extroverted, etc. But there is like a quality about those people that inspires other people. So I would say those are the 3 categories at the moment.
So cool. Just a quick check-in before we do more questions. Christie, are you still good for time?
I'm good.
Okay. All right. So Adolfo, I think you're next.
Yeah, thank you. Chris, loved your stories. Appreciate
you.
that you were able to put us there in front of your experience. So I appreciate that. I have a question about this insight that in sports, you do 95% preparation and 5% execution, but in the business world, it's the opposite, right? You for the most part, you may be ill prepared. So how does that color your conversations with, let's say, with your teammates, with your co-founders, when you spot perhaps a gap or something? How does this play into those conversations that you have?
It is sometimes a tension point. Like one of my co-founders is like very, very high energy, very kind of like gung-ho about that. And probably like I am like more on the other end of the spectrum. I'm like, we should prepare more. So to give you an example, like when we start our fundraise, I'm like, hey, like we should have all of the materials prepared. And these are the 30 questions investors are most likely to ask. Like, let's actually prepare what the answers are for them. And he's like, no, we'll just like go out and start talking to people. And I was like, okay, like here's the tension point between us because like I want to do more prep and he is less prep. And so you like I'm not sure that I'm actually answering your question here. Like give me more guidance here.
No, but I think you're sharing that experience because I'm struggling with that precisely, right? I spent hours preparing for a meeting and my partner said, oh, we're just going to do this. And then, of course, you cannot just say you're ill prepared, right? But so I wonder if you had any insights on that. But
I think, like you respect each other for your strengths, right? Like my co-founder is incredible in that. He, like, I would say appreciation is his superpower, and just like the energy that he has, people want to be in his orbit, right? Now we're complementary because my strength is like I'm very prepared, nothing slips through the cracks. I can think through the logic and the rational part of it better than the emotional side of it compared to him. And so I respect his strengths and he respects mine. Now, part of that is to then say, this is my process, right? In order for me to have that strength that you respect, I need time before something to prepare. Or I need, when you give me feedback, I need time to go away and digest it. Or when we're about to go on like a big roadshow of meetings in the evenings, like I don't want to have dinner with you. I need to be an introvert and have time alone. So like whatever your style is, because you respect each other's strengths, you say like, this is my process to have that, be able to deliver that strength.
Brilliant. That perfectly answers my question. Appreciate you sharing that. Thanks.
Thanks, Adolfo. Dawn, and then Susan.
Hey, Christie, thank you so much for speaking with us today. I'm curious, you talked a lot about all the coaching and feedback that you've received and how you sought out coaching, not just as an athlete, but, as a professional. I'm curious about your startup and I see a parallel there in how you are planning to make money by developing people and then transferring them. So I'm just curious how you kind of identified that idea or how that evolved, because it seems so similar to, you know, all the coaching and everything that you benefited from. So can you just speak to a little bit about how you evolved your idea for your startup?
The idea evolved because we wanted to help athletes first and foremost. And so if you think about a football player or a soccer player's career, usually you're in a youth academy until like 16 to 18, and then you take your first pro contract. Now, at the point that you take your first pro contract, your career is largely not within your control anymore as the athlete. So you're relying on your agent to find you the next opportunity. So you're hoping they're well networked. You're hoping that other teams around the world are scouting you for your next opportunity. And you're hoping, you know, that your coach, I guess, is the best placed person to say, okay, Dawn, you've just signed your first pro contract. Where do you aspire to be in 5 years' time? You know, in the national team, playing in the Bundesliga, in the Premier League, in the NWSL. What are the gaps in your ability? What are your strengths? And what is the pathway to get there? Now, that's what your coach should do. But in professional sport, a coach's contract says, hey, you lose 3 games, you're fired. And so then it's like, new coach comes in, they're like, okay, we're running a different formation. You play, you know, center midfielder attacking, but now we're playing defending. And so you're on the bench. And so the athlete's career is sort of derailed through no fault of their own. And so we're like, what would it look like to give athletes a pathway from club to club as they develop, the opportunity to reach their potential, whatever that happens to be. Now we're doing it in soccer because there's a business model around that, which is the transfer market. So that is the problem and the idea where it came from. When we think about performance, we think about it differently to most people in that we break down performance for an athlete into your capability, like what can you do, your skill, strength, speed, your capacity, how long can you do it for? Now, both of those are quite physical, and that's pretty much what everybody scouts and develops athletes on. But we also think about what's your consistency, so your ability to perform under pressure, and what's your compatibility, so like which teammates can you do it with under what formations. And those two are probably a competitive advantage for us in terms of developing athletes, because they're the mental side of the game. And I can tell you as an athlete, like almost no one is even tracking this data, let alone deliberately coaching it for athletes and telling you as an athlete, here's where you're good, here's where you fall short, in terms of like different pressure situations in a game or different compatibility situations with your teammates.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. Susan, and then Cardam, and then Swapnil. And I guess then we'll see where we are.
And yeah, then we'll check. So, Christie, this is just wonderful. And I mean, we knew it was going to be awesome, but it was way beyond that. So thank you. It's been lovely. So I have many questions too, but I'll just do one for now. So in business, you know, as a leader, it's super important that you have kind of a physical regimen, you have a mental regimen, and you have what I think of as a spiritual regimen. So tell us about yours, especially the spiritual and the mental regimen, and what you've learned, like what's worked, what hasn't worked, how has it changed?
On the spiritual side, I am not religious at all. I'm Australian. We're a very non-religious country for the most part. But I love to hike. And the reason I love to hike, I would probably go on two-week trips a year. And the reason I like to hike is because it gives you perspective, right? Like you feel tiny amongst the mountains and the world feels vast. And you know, when we get caught up in our heads and we get stressed, like what is it that causes stress? Like it's, you think your problems are, I call it like the 3 Ps, like personal, pervasive and permanent, right? It feels like, man, like this is only, the universe is out to get me. Like this is a big problem for me, right? It feels very personal. It feels pervasive, like it affects everything in your life. Like, oh man, if I don't get that job or do this project or land that client, like everything in my life is ruined. And it feels permanent, right? Like, man, if something bad happens, or if this, continues, this poor situation, I will never recover from it. And I think you need to like step out and zoom out from that and have like more perspective in your life. And hiking is mostly the tool that I use to do that. So that's sort of my spiritual practice in some ways. On the mental side, I actually think working out is my mental break. And so after so many years of training, when I go to training, I don't think about anything except training. And there are no distractions, no phones, no stress. You're only thinking about the sport. And so to me, that is the mental refresh equivalent to meditation.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Cardam, and then Swapnil, and then we'll move over into overtime.
Sure. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I really appreciate what you just said about really honing in on the differentiators you bring and seeing the athletes differently. And specifically, I'm curious, as data science students, how do you think about looking at compatibility from a data perspective?
Okay, cool. This is fun. So we actually use a lot of like betting data, believe it or not. So we like scrape the betting data off a lot of the publicly available websites. And compatibility specifically would include things like who is the glue player on the team, right? So your stats might not reflect, hey, assists, pass completion, goals, etc. But when you are on the field, your teammates play better. So it's reflected in other people's stats. It might also include like, what is your chemistry like with specific individual players? So is your pass completion rate higher with other certain players on the field, right? Like you read each other better, you pass the ball better to each other. That's compatibility. Consistency, or like performance under pressure. We're looking at things like, do you know how you perform in the first 10 minutes of the game versus the last? When you're up a goal versus down a goal, home game versus away game, playing against your childhood coach or your former team, with hostile fans or friendly fans, right after a yellow card. So like all of these are situations that add or subtract pressure. Do you even know how you perform in those relative to other players and relative to your own standards of performance? And then how do we take that information and design training to support that? So to give you like a example from my sporting career, in trampolining, under pressure, you want to squeeze every muscle you have as tight as you can because you will perform better, right? Like you would do like a more perfect gymnastics trip. Now in beach volleyball, like any ball sport, if you squeeze every muscle as tight as you can, the ball will just like ricochet in a random direction. So you want to be like loose and relaxed under pressure. Now this was like quite difficult for me to unlearn that physical response. And so my coach sort of like recognized this. And what we did in training was like all of these drills where like a game in volleyball is to 21. It's like we did all of these drills where the game started at like 18 all. Because I used to get to 18 all and tense every muscle in my body. And I needed to like unlearn that. So then I can design training to like develop that piece of pressure or consistency that I was lacking.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cardam. Swapnil.
Cool.
Hi, Christie. I mean, I'm enjoying this conversation so much. Thanks for coming. There's something you mentioned early on that your one pivotal moment was when you were 8 years old, right? And you had that moment where you said, you want to, win that, and you had your coach and all that. So I'm a father of two boys who want to be soccer players. One is 8-year-old, the other is 13 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And, you talked about, and I'm also a late entrepreneur, where after a corporate life, I'm working on my startup, and I believe that I can do it, right? So I'm finding this very conflicting mindset. When I think about my boys, I think about that, the small probability of success, and I want them to have the plan B, right? As an Asian parent, hey, you will get to do all this soccer as long as you keep your A's, right? That's my mindset. It's not that I don't believe, but, I want them to have the plan B. Whereas on my startup, I believe that I'm going to make it happen, right? Whatever I set my mind to. So what role your parents or parents of any big, athlete that has made it play, right? And how do you kind of, guide through that? How do you navigate that? I mean, I'm kind of going through it right now myself, so I'm just wondering.
Okay, I am not a parent, so you can toss all of my advice out the window if it's not relevant. So take it with a grain of salt. My parents were actually like relatively hands off. Like my mum said to me, she's like, I will come to one tournament a year. You can pick which one. And then she'd like show up and watch and like leave. She wouldn't even drive me there. And my parents were like, we will drive you to 2 practices a week. And if you want to go more, you've got to organize your own carpool or take the bus. So like, you know, they really allowed me to be self-driven in sport. And similar in school, like I had a scholarship to my school and they were like, hey, as long as you keep your scholarship, like you're good. Like we're not going to stand over you and hover on the homework. One thing I'd say on sport specifically is I've played 3 sports, right? What I've learned is parents always say like, I want my kids to play the sport they love. To me, like this is a bit of a misnomer because I loved all 3 sports. They're all totally different. We tend to love what we're good at. We tend to love the things that we have good community or friendships in. And we tend to love sports where we have a great coach. And so I wish that my mum had put me in tennis, because imagine if I had been top 10 in the world in tennis instead of trampolining, right? Like totally different outcome, even though it's essentially the same amount of work requirements as an input. So I would put my kids in sports where they probably have the most probability of success based on their physicality, knowing that they will enjoy it if they have a good coach, if they do well in it, if they have fun teammates. And so that's my sort of like controversial sporting advice as a non-parent. So please take with a grain of salt. And you know, every kid is different, so you're gonna have to like personalize the situation for each of them. I don't know. Good luck. You can probably give me advice on this, honestly.
No, but appreciate it. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks, Swapnil. Susan.
Yeah, so before we move to overtime, just wanted to then say again, Christie, thank you just so much. This has just been incredible. And we always ask this question too, is what can we do to help you?
Thank you. I appreciate that. I am halfway through our fundraising round. So if you know anyone that would like to own sporting teams, is passionate about athletes and athlete development, please make an introduction to me, because that's the type of investor I want. Someone that's like pretty hands-on, pretty passionate, and loves athletes.
Cool. Absolutely.
So Christie, I'm going to end our recording now. Please do stick around for overtime, but thank you for this. This was a real huge treat. And so yeah, just a little before we go, we've been doing this startups for more than 3.5 years, almost 4 years now. And a few people on our session have DM'd me and have basically said that you're the best speaker that we've had at startups. Now I don't want this to go to your head.
But awesome.
Sorry?
Not that I'm competitive, but I love
Not that you're competitive at all. Now I don't want this to go to your head at all. So like, you know, like this was horrible. It sucked. There was nothing useful here. You should definitely write a book. Thank you for this. This was really a treat. And personally, I needed to hear a lot of what you said today. So thank you for this. Just before I forget, next week is the HBAP social overtime. So startups won't be meeting, but the following week we're going to be hosting a panel on AI and education. So please do join us for that. I'm going to end it here. Please stick around for overtime. And thank you, Christie. You are amazing.